Now, experts say President Cyril Ramaphosa's testimony at the State Capture Commission did not offer much insight. Ramaphosa appeared before the commission last week, accounting for state capture events that took place when he was the country's deputy president under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma. They say his testimony was crafted to protect the power balance within the ANC. To unpack more on this, we're now joined by political analyst Sanusha Naidu and political risk analyst Matlala Setlhalogile. Sanusha, Matlala, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. A lot of people dissatisfied with the amount of information that President Cyril Ramaphosa gave. Now, it is argued that he was protecting the top six or the leadership within the ANC. What are your thoughts, Sanusha?
Yeah, I mean, good morning to you and to my colleague and viewers. I think the challenge is, how does the president find that fine-tuning in terms of what he needed to answer for and what was put in terms of the knowledge that he had. And I think that was the bigger question, the bigger existential question that most of us were trying to understand, whether or not he would provide the kind of complexities to the answers to the complexities of how state capture emerged, when and where, what was his role, did he actually push back, what was the intervention that he made, and all of that seems to have indicated to a large extent that as much as he was in the deputy presidency position, there were structures and challenges that he had to navigate. And I think he keeps coming back to the fact that he chose the option that he felt was right for him, and that option was to stay within the labyrinth of the powers of the state, and also to try and make sure that wherever he could actually push back. But again, I think we've been so saturated with regard to state capture in this country. We've been so disaffected and also kind of very frustrated because we keep coming to this point and we keep wanting the answers, that when we don't get the answers, we feel as if people are withholding that information from us for all kinds of reasons. And I think that's the challenge around not just the Zondo Commission, but even in terms of how state capture, even how litigation is treated. And I think the president had indicated that it's not an easy task, and I think we all recognize and acknowledge that he had made important interventions at the commission as well. But there are those references or those pulse points where I think people wanted to hear more. And the question is, what would have happened if we had heard more? Would we have been satisfied, or we would have become more frustrated?
I suppose the question now is, or a perspective to look at, is that the president probably knows a lot more now than he did, if what he says is accurate, during his term as deputy president of the ANC and deputy president of the country.
Indeed. I mean, obviously, we have to also recognize that there is information that's in an official capacity and information that's in an unofficial capacity. How do you deal with that unofficial capacity information? Because once you put it out there in the public domain, you need to then back it up with all kinds of evidence. And I think when he constantly referenced the media, some of us were taken aback to say that, Mr. President, you were actually in a very higher echelons of the party structure. The media wouldn't have been the only reference point in which you have used to obtain knowledge. There would have been other reference points in which you would have been able to assimilate the knowledge. But I guess that's the way these power dynamics play out in the party. And I think the one significant point for me in the two-day testimony was when one of the evidence leaders asked the president, who would have fired you? And as much as he was reluctant to come forward and actually give the definitive answer, he eventually had to say that it would have been the president. And I think these are the nuances around how complex and complicated state power is, and made more complicated when you have these kinds of swinging door issues the swinging door between the party and the state. And to a larger degree, I think it's also that challenge about how do you navigate those two spaces. I do think that, at the end of the day, we didn't get as what we anticipated and expected to get, but I do think as well that we got to, at some point, appreciate, not all of it, but appreciate some of it in terms of what the president put out there.
Matlala, in an article that you co-penned with Sanusha, you talk about Ramaphosa's powerlessness in the corridors of power, and this position emanated from the party level. Walk us through this.
Thanks and morning to your viewers. I think this powerlessness that we believe emanated from his party position was because of what we detail in the piece as well about the ANC's moral degeneration. I mean, for instance, if the idea of the state capture had to be a contested one within the party, contesting whether it exists, the extent to which it exists, and what should be done about it, that already shows a party that its moral fiber has degenerated to the lowest possible levels. And I think just to add to what Sanusha made mention of earlier about information in official capacity, unofficial or official information, you'd remember that the first thing that Ramaphosa did once he ascended to presidency, the state presidency that is, he established numerous commissions. I mean, the Nanjat Commission, the Mokoro Commission. While he was aware of this, the existence of the state capture, but we tempted to actually believe that it was not official information. The only way to get official information is through instituting several investigations. And these commissions of inquiries were actually formalizing this evidence that came to the fore. Besides that, look, one of the things as well that Sanusha mentions, which I highly agree with, is that at times the president's testimony, we feel it was disappointing, but this is largely because of our assumptions and expectations as South Africa. We believe that he ought to have known something. But look, Ramaphosa remained within the government as he did, and I can point out to one instance where the nuclear power deal was stopped in its tracks. This power deal was estimated to cost the country about $1 trillion. There was a resistance from within the government to that nuclear deal. This is one of the instances we can use as an example of maybe Ramaphosa in his allies' existence or remaining within government actually stopped the state capture project. And I say the state capture project referring to the actual Gupta-led state capture project. Because state capture comes in numerous forms. And in this instance, we specifically referring to the Gupta-led state capture. But this was put in its tracks from within. That's one of the instances. And what's interesting again about the president's testimony, I think it was for the first time that he kind of hinted that actually Jacob Zuma spearheaded the state capture project by saying that he feared being axed from the government. By whom? By the former president. That was for the first time that he actually hinted that, look, this guy would have fired me. Why would have fired you for stopping state capture if he was not part of it? I think that was the first time that Cyril actually mentioned or hinted that the former president, was actually spearheading the state capture project. And that is one of the significant points from his testimony.
Now, you speak about the single project, the nuclear project, as one of those aspects that might have been stopped dead in its tracks. Are there any others or any other situations that we can look at that would exonerate the president, so to speak, from keeping mum during that period of state capture until obviously he got to the stage where he was the person in charge and could make certain decisions?
Look, the president cannot be completely exonerated from that. Ultimately, he was part of the state leadership. He was part of the ANC's leadership. He has to be apportioned some level of culpability. For give an example where traditionally the deputy president, when he assumed office as the deputy president in 2014, he was in charge of the interministerial committee on SOEs. But later, sometime in 2016 August, Jacob Zuma actually headed the coordination of that committee that oversees SOEs. I think the first 2 years in which Ramaphosa headed this committee might have acted as a buffer of sorts, and that was a disturbance to Zuma and his allies, the protagonists of state capture. So those are some of the instances where you realize that actually Cyril's presence might have actually put brakes. Look, as Sanusha said, some of the questions cannot be answered definitively. Had Ramaphosa not being heading the Interministerial Committee on SOEs from 2014 to 2016. What would have happened in those 2 years? Was Zuma taking over that committee overseeing SOEs, an acknowledgement that Cyril's presence in that specific role actually hinders the pace that they would like to advance state capture at?
Now, one of the things that came out of state capture was the fact that there are close on 700 SOEs, I think, that we know nothing about or that are very much under the radar. So my question is this, Sanusha. Was state capture a season in our history that is over, or has state capture manifested itself in various other forms? Because if state capture was about looting state resources, we are continually exposed, particularly by journalists, of situations where money is continually pilfered. Maybe not on as grand a scale, but it's still happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we define state capture, I mean, again, it's the question of the magnitude of what we are talking about. If you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at state capture in itself. I think we've got to be clear about the distinguishing factors. And I'm not saying that what we are seeing in other dimensions of tender fraud and other irregularities is not to be equated with some form of state capture. But I think state capture has a very particular architecture to the way in which it evolves. You've got to capture something first. You just don't take the money, because to get to the money, you've got to put into place an arsenal of how you're going to do it. It's like watching the Netflix series Money Heist and figuring it out in many ways. How do you get to the money? So I think what we saw now is the big kind of architecture of capture. You go for the boards of SOEs. It's very strategic. Why do you need to actually put your kind of individuals, your proponents, your supporters, your allies into those specific boards, and why those people need to then play within a particular role of compliance? I think when you look at the tender fraud issues, the irregularities with regard to, say, PPEs that came out last year, and which the SIU are investigating in terms of the billions that have been defrauded from the state, I think it was about how people were on registers that weren't supposed to be on the state register, didn't comply.
Sanusha, I'm afraid we're going to have to call time on the conversation, but I appreciate your time. Matlala, thank you so much for joining us, both Sanusha Naidu and Matlala Setlhalogile. We were having a conversation about the President's testimony at the Zondo Commission.